There is a moment, and you may have already lived it, where everything stops. Not the world, not the clocks, not the traffic outside your window. Those keep moving, those never care. What stops is you. It happens differently for every person. For some, it is a Tuesday morning, ordinary as bread, when they look at themselves in the mirror and do not recognize who is staring back. For others, it is the moment a door closes, a door they believed would always be open, and they hear the sound of that latch like a gunshot in a quiet room. For others still, it is the long, slow realization that arrives not all at once, but drip by drip, like water through a crack in a ceiling, until one day the entire roof gives way and they are left sitting in the rubble of a life they thought was solid. You know what that moment feels like. Everyone who is truly alive knows. And now I want to tell you something that nobody told me when I was standing in mine. That moment, that precise, terrible, irreplaceable moment of stopping, was not your destruction. It was your beginning. Before we go any further, I need you to hear a story, not a metaphor, not an analogy wrapped in inspirational language, a real story about a real animal that has been doing something extraordinary for 60 million years while human beings were still learning how to walk upright. Somewhere over the Rift Valley of East Africa, at an altitude that would crush the breath out of your chest, a martial eagle is climbing. She has been flying for 6 hours without landing. The thermal currents under her wings are shifting. The afternoon storms are building, which means the air will turn violent soon, which means most birds are descending, looking for branches, looking for shelter, looking for anything that is not sky. She climbs. At 7,000 feet, the wind becomes a wall. It hits her with a force that would snap a smaller creature's wings like dry sticks. Her feathers compress. Her body tilts 30 degrees off her intended course. For one fraction of a second, she looks like she might tumble. She does not tumble. She reads the wind. She finds the edge of the storm where the chaos becomes pressure, and she uses that pressure, the very thing trying to destroy her, and she rises above the storm entirely. Below her, from a height no other predator in Africa can reach, she can see a stretch of savanna the size of a small country. She can see the wildebeest migration from 3 miles away. She can see a field mouse moving through dry grass from 2 miles above. She can see everything, and then she folds her wings and drops. In 11 seconds, she covers a mile of vertical distance. She hits her target with talons that exert 500 pounds of pressure per square inch. The impact is over before the mouse's nervous system registers that anything has happened at all. This is not just hunting. This is precision. This is patience. This is absolute mastery of the environment that was trying to kill her. This is the eagle mentality. Now, before you say, "I am not an eagle, I am a person. I have bills and a bad knee and a family that doesn't understand me and a career that has not gone the way I planned," I want you to stop. Because here is what you need to understand before we begin this journey together. You were built for altitude, not metaphorical altitude, not the altitude of a motivational poster on a dentist's office wall. The real kind, the kind that is cold and thin and uncomfortable and demands everything from you and gives you in return a view of the world that changes you permanently. You were built to climb when everything around you is descending. You were built to use storms as fuel. You were built to see what others cannot see from where they are standing. The only question, and this is the only question that matters, the question this entire audiobook exists to answer, is whether you are willing to become who you were built to be. 14 chapters stand between you and that answer, and I am going to warn you right now. Some of what you are about to hear will not feel like inspiration. Some of it will feel like surgery. Some of it will reach into places you have carefully boarded up and locked away, and it will pull out something that has been rotting there in the dark. That is necessary. You cannot fly with dead weight on your wings. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Mutation. Let me tell you about the moment an eagle is not an eagle. It is the most vulnerable, most extraordinary, most instructive moment in the animal kingdom, and almost nobody talks about it, because most people who tell stories about eagles only want to talk about the glory, the wingspan, the talons, the kill. They skip the part that actually makes the eagle possible. Here is what happens in an eyrie, an eagle's nest, perched on a cliff face 300 feet above a valley floor. The egg has been there for 45 days. The mother has barely left it. She has sat through rainstorms that would flood a city street, through winds that turned rocks into projectiles, through nights so cold the air itself seemed to crystallize. She has sat because sitting is the only thing standing between that egg and death. And then, one morning, something moves inside the egg, not hatching, not breaking through, just a small, uncertain movement, the first sign that something inside is fighting to exist. It will take another 2 days for that eaglet to fully emerge. 2 days of fighting against a shell that feels, from the inside, like an entire universe. 2 days of effort so total, so consuming, so exhausting that many chicks die from it. The effort of being born is not a gentle thing. It is a battle, the first battle. And it matters profoundly that nobody helps. Do you know what happens when a well-meaning human breaks open an eagle egg to help the chick emerge faster? The chick dies, almost always, because the struggle of breaking out of the shell builds the neck muscles, the chest muscles, the grip strength that the eagle will need for its entire life. Remove the struggle, and you remove the eagle. You are left with a beautiful, helpless creature that cannot feed itself, cannot fly, cannot survive, despite looking, on the outside, exactly like an eagle should look. The struggle is not the obstacle to becoming an eagle. The struggle is the mechanism of becoming an eagle. And this single biological fact is the first and most foundational principle of what I call the eagle mentality. Because somewhere in your life, something has been struggling to emerge. Something has been fighting against a shell that feels, from the inside, impossibly thick. And the world around you, with the best of intentions, or sometimes with no intentions at all, has been trying to crack that shell open for you. It cannot crack it open for you. You have to break through from the inside. Now let me tell you about David. David was 29 years old when I first heard his story, and at 29 he had already survived more than most people face in a lifetime. He had grown up in a city where the primary career options were crime, labor, or luck. His father had left when David was 4, not dramatically, not with a fight or a slammed door, just gone one morning the way a season goes, without announcement. His mother worked 2 jobs and loved him completely and was almost never there. By 17, David had been arrested twice, not for violence but for the slow-motion desperation of a young man who needed money and had not yet found a legal way to get it. Here is what David did not do. He did not decide this was the story of his life. He decided it was the first chapter. He started reading, not because someone told him to, because one night, in a detention facility that smelled like industrial cleaner and disappointment, a guard left a book on the table. Accidentally, or perhaps not accidentally, the world works in stranger ways than we admit. And David picked it up and read it in one night, cover to cover, and something cracked. Not the shell, not yet. But the first fracture appeared. That book led to another, and a GED, and a community college acceptance, and a scholarship that barely covered half his expenses but covered enough, and a job he was overqualified for but took because it gave him access to people who had what he was building toward. And a decade of grinding, not inspirational poster grinding, but the real kind, the kind where you are exhausted on a Thursday night and you still sit down and do the work, not because you feel motivated, but because you have decided that this version of your life is non-negotiable. David is now 41. He runs a logistics company he built from a single truck he bought with money he saved working a job that paid $12 an hour. He employs 37 people, most of them from the same neighborhoods he grew up in. He does not tell his story in interviews very often because he does not think of it as a story worth telling. He thinks of it as the obvious outcome of a simple decision he made when he was 17 years old in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner. The decision was this: I am going to break through this shell from the inside, and I am going to do it alone, and I am going to do it even if it kills me, because dying inside this shell is not a life I am willing to live. That decision is the eagle mentality in its purest, most unadorned form. Now here is where I need to ask you something uncomfortable. Where is your shell? What is the thing that has been encasing you, keeping you safe, yes, but also keeping you contained, small, protected from the very friction that would build your strength? Is it a relationship that has become a cage so familiar you have stopped calling it a cage? Is it a job that stopped challenging you 4 years ago but pays enough to make leaving feel irrational? Is it a story you tell about yourself? I am not the kind of person who, that you have repeated so many times it has calcified into something you have mistaken for truth? Is it fear, not general fear, specific fear, the kind with a face on it? Is it the fear of being seen trying and failing? Because that fear is remarkably common and remarkably destructive, and it is one of the primary reasons why people stay inside shells that stopped fitting them years ago. Better to not try and preserve the possibility than to try and have the possibility destroyed. That is the logic of the shell. That is the logic of a creature that was never meant to live inside one. Here is what the eagle mentality says about that fear. It says fail publicly, fail loudly, fail in ways that people can see and point at and narrate. Because every time you fail at the thing you are trying to become, you are building exactly the muscle that will eventually make you capable of becoming it. The failure is not evidence that you cannot. The failure is the mechanism by which you will. Every master was once a disaster. Every eagle was once a struggle inside a shell. This is where it starts. Not with the soaring, with the struggling, with the absolute refusal to let anyone else crack your shell open for you, no matter how much they want to, no matter how much they believe they are helping, no matter how certain you are in the dark moments of the night that you cannot break through on your own. You can, you will, but it has to come from the inside. Chapter 2. The altitude principle. There is a reason eagles do not walk. It is not because they cannot. An eagle on the ground is not helpless. It can walk. It can run in short bursts. It can use those devastating talons at ground level. But something fascinating happens to an eagle when it stays on the ground for too long. Its perspective collapses. From the ground, an eagle can see perhaps 200 meters in any direction if the terrain is flat and the grass is low. From the air, from altitude, that same eagle can see everything relevant to its survival for miles in every direction. The ground is not the eagle's natural operating environment. The ground is where eagles land to do specific things. It is not where eagles live. The question I want to ask you, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it immediately, is this: are you living at altitude, or are you spending your life on the ground? Now let me define what altitude means in the context of a human life, because it has nothing to do with physical height and everything to do with the level at which you are thinking and operating. Ground level thinking is reactive. It responds to what is directly in front of it. It is dominated by the immediate, the urgent, the loud. It makes decisions based on what is happening right now, in this moment, with no view of what is coming from 3 miles away. Ground-level thinking is not stupid. Some of the most intelligent people in the world operate primarily at ground level, and they are genuinely good at solving the problems that appear directly in front of them, but they are always slightly behind. They are always playing catch-up. They are always surprised by things that, from altitude, were visible for weeks. Altitude thinking is anticipatory. It sees the migration before it arrives. It sees the storm while it is still building on the horizon. It makes decisions based not on what is happening right now, but on what is coming, and because it is making those decisions early, it almost always has more options than the creature on the ground, who is only just now reacting to what altitude thinking already resolved. I want to give you a concrete example of this, and I am going to pull it from business because that is where it is most visible, but I want you to understand that this principle applies equally to relationships, to health, to every dimension of a life being lived with intent. In 2001, a small music technology company that most people had never heard of was watching the music industry from a very unusual altitude. While the major record labels were on the ground, fighting the immediate threat of digital piracy, spending their resources on lawsuits and lobbying and desperate attempts to preserve a revenue model that was already dying, this small company was asking a different question. Not how do we stop what is happening, but what is this telling us about where the world is going, and how do we become the infrastructure of that future? That company released a product that seemed, at the time, almost absurdly simple. 1,000 songs in your pocket, a legal way to buy a single song for 99 cents rather than a $15 album. The music industry called it a threat. They were wrong. It was an architecture. It was altitude thinking made into hardware. You know the rest of this story. Apple did not just survive the digital music revolution. Apple became the revolution because it was operating from altitude while everyone else was on the ground. Now, I am not asking you to be Steve Jobs. I am asking you to find your altitude. And I want to tell you how to do it practically, because this audiobook is not about abstract inspiration. It is about the specific mechanisms of a specific way of thinking and living. The first mechanism is this: create distance between events and your response to them. This sounds simple. It is not. Because the natural human response to everything, to a harsh email, to a lost sale, to a relationship conflict, to unexpected financial pressure, is immediate and ground level. The nervous system is not designed for altitude. It is designed for survival. Survival is ground level by necessity. If a lion is running at you, altitude thinking is a liability. You need to react now with everything you have. But most of the challenges of a modern life are not lions. They are situations that present themselves with the urgency of lions, but do not actually require the response of someone being chased. And when you bring lion response to a not lion situation, you almost always make it worse. You send the email you should not have sent. You make the financial decision that felt necessary in the panic of the moment. You say the thing in the relationship that cannot be unsaid. The eagle mentality trains the pause. It builds, deliberately and over time, the ability to receive an event, any event, and create a gap between receiving it and responding to it. That gap is where altitude lives. That gap is where you climb above the ground level reaction and ask, what do I actually see from up here? What is really happening? What is this a part of? Where is this going? What response will I be proud of when I look back on it from a year from now? Eagles do not hunt in panic, ever. That is not hyperbole, it is behavioral fact. An eagle's hunt is a masterwork of patience, calculation, and perfectly timed action. The eagle observes, it circles, it reads the terrain, the wind, the behavior of the prey below. It may watch for an hour before it moves. And when it moves with absolute commitment, because it has already resolved all the variables that would make commitment dangerous. That is altitude thinking applied to action. The second mechanism is this: protect your altitude from gravity. Gravity, in this context, is every force in your environment that pulls your thinking back to the ground. And I want to be honest with you about how many forms gravity takes, because most of them wear disguises. Urgency is gravity. Not all urgency is fake. Some things genuinely are urgent and require ground-level response. But the culture we live in has become so saturated with manufactured urgency that most people no longer have the ability to distinguish between genuine emergency and a notification on their phone. When everything feels urgent, nothing feels important. And when nothing feels important, altitude becomes impossible. Proximity is gravity. The people you spend the most time with are shaping your thinking at a level you cannot fully perceive while you are inside it. If the people closest to you operate primarily at ground level, if their conversations are about reactions to recent events, about complaints about current circumstances, about the drama of the immediate, that is the altitude at which your thinking will eventually settle. because altitude requires enormous energy to maintain and the path of least resistance is always ground level. This does not mean you abandon the people you love. The eagle mentality is not about isolation. Eagles mate for life. Eagles are extraordinarily attentive parents, but eagles do not let the ground determine where they live, regardless of what is happening there. Consumption is gravity. What you are putting into your mind every day, the news you watch, the social media you scroll, the conversations you have, the entertainment you choose, is either building your altitude or eroding it. There is no neutral content. Everything you consume is either lifting you or pulling you down, and the most pernicious forms of gravity are the ones that feel passive, feel restful, feel like a break, when in reality they are burning the fuel you need to climb. The third mechanism is the hardest one. It is this: get comfortable with being alone at altitude, because here is the truth nobody tells you about high-level thinking and high-level living. Most people will not be up there with you. Not because they are lesser, not because you are superior, simply because altitude requires sacrifice of comfort, of certainty, of the easy company of people who agree with you, and most people, when presented with the choice between comfortable ground and uncomfortable altitude, will choose the ground every single time. This is not a judgment. It is a law of thermodynamics applied to human ambition, and the eagle mentality asks you to be okay with that. To find the specific piece of the bird that is circling alone at 7,000 feet, in the thin air above the storm, seeing what nobody else can see yet. To not mistake the loneliness of altitude for evidence that you are doing something wrong. To understand that the greatest views in life are never crowded. You were not built to live at the level of whatever is happening around you. You were built to rise above it. Rise. Chapter 3. The Storm Protocol. I need you to recalibrate something fundamental. You have been taught, not explicitly but through 1,000 accumulated messages from your culture, your education, your upbringing, that storms are to be avoided, that difficulty is a sign that something has gone wrong, that resistance means stop. The eagle knows something different. I want you to picture this scene with me, and I want you to make it visceral, make it real in your body as you hear it, because this is not information I am giving you. This is a feeling I am trying to transfer. A golden eagle is cruising at 3,000 feet over a Wyoming mountain range when it detects the leading edge of a storm front. The pressure drop is measurable. The wind shift is registerable. The clouds on the western horizon are building with that specific anvil shape that means serious turbulence is coming, the kind that grounds planes and terrifies hikers and sends every sensible creature toward shelter. The eagle turns toward the storm, not away from it, toward it. It begins to climb, using the leading edge updrafts that the storm's approach creates, the powerful column of rising air that precedes the violence. The eagle gains altitude rapidly, almost effortlessly, riding the energy of the approaching chaos to get higher than it could climb on any calm day. By the time the storm arrives in full force, the eagle is above it, not safe from the storm, not sheltered from it. Above it, in the clear cold air where turbulence does not reach, where the sun is still shining, where the view extends to the horizon in every direction, where the violence below is just weather, just something happening down there, something that does not determine the eagle's experience. Now, let me translate this into your life with the specific, uncomfortable precision it deserves. What is your storm? Not a metaphorical storm, the actual thing, the actual pressure front that you have been turning away from. The job loss, or the possibility of job loss, the relationship that is in genuine trouble, the health issue you have been half examining, the financial situation that you look at directly for about 12 seconds before you look away because the full picture is too uncomfortable to hold in focus. The storm you have been avoiding has not weakened while you have been avoiding it. It has been building. And here is what the eagle mentality requires of you. It requires you to turn toward it, not to accept it as permanent, not to pretend you enjoy it, not to perform the kind of toxic positivity that has contaminated the self-help world to the point of uselessness, but to face it with full clarity, assess it with eagle-altitude vision, and then use the energy of it, the urgency it creates, the clarity it demands, to go higher than you would have gone on a calm, comfortable, stormless day. Because here is the dark truth about calm days. Calm days make you soft. Not physically soft, necessarily, though that can happen. Mentally and spiritually soft. Comfortable, unexamined. The kind of life that a calm, comfortable, unchallenged day produces is a life that has not been stress-tested, has not been forced to find its actual limits, has not discovered what it is made of because it has never been required to find out. Every significant human being in history, not just the famous ones, but the genuinely significant ones, the ones who changed the lives of the people around them in ways that echoed outward, every single one of them was forged in a storm they did not ask for and could not avoid. I want to tell you about a woman I will call Clara. Clara was 52 years old when her storm arrived, and it arrived all at once, the way the worst ones do. Her husband of 26 years told her, on an otherwise unremarkable Sunday afternoon, that he had been living a secret for 11 years and that he wanted out of the marriage. Her daughter, 24 and brilliant, called the same week with a crisis of her own that required every resource Clara had. And then, as if the universe was conducting some kind of stress test on purpose, the small business Clara had built over 15 years, a catering company that had been her identity and her income and her community, lost its anchor client due to a corporate restructuring that had nothing to do with her performance or her quality. 3 storms at once. Here is what Clara did not do. She did not collapse. Not because she was not devastated, she was. Not because she did not cry. She cried every day for 6 weeks. Not because she had some superhuman resistance to pain. She felt every bit of it. But even in the worst of it, something in Clara had the instinct of the eagle. She turned toward the storms instead of away from them. She sat with her husband for 12 hours across several conversations and demanded the full truth, not because she wanted the marriage to end, but because she understood that a life built on an incomplete picture was not a life she could rebuild on. She got the full picture. It was worse than she had imagined and also, in a strange way, clarifying. She knew now exactly what she was dealing with. Clarity, even painful clarity, is altitude. She went to her daughter. She was not the solution. Her daughter needed professional help and got it. But Clara showed up consistently in the way that only a parent who has stopped performing okayness and started being honest about struggle can show up. Her daughter later told her that those weeks, where her mother was visibly broken and still present, were more meaningful than 24 years of her mother being strong. And the business? The business she rebuilt over 2 years into something smaller and more focused and more profitable than what it had been, because the loss of the anchor client forced her to examine every assumption she had been operating on and keep only what was actually working. The storm stripped the business down to its studs. She looked at the studs, and she built something better. Clara is 61 now. She does not describe the period when she was 52 as the worst time of her life. She describes it as the time when she found out who she actually was. That is the storm protocol. That is what happens when you turn toward the thing that is trying to break you and discover that you are not as breakable as you thought. Here is the practical framework I want you to carry out of this chapter and into the rest of your life. When a storm arrives, when difficulty arrives in any form, run it through 3 questions before you respond. First question, what is this storm actually made of? Break it down. Name its components specifically. Vague dread is always worse than specific challenge because vague dread cannot be addressed. Specific challenge always has specific responses. The moment you convert "my life is falling apart" into a list of the actual things that are wrong, you have already reduced the power of the storm by half because you have transformed it from a feeling into a problem, and problems, unlike feelings, can be solved. Second question, what is this storm revealing that I needed to see? Every storm exposes something, a structural weakness in a business, a relational pattern that was never sustainable, a personal avoidance that was always going to come due eventually. The storm did not create the weakness. It revealed a weakness that was already there. This is uncomfortable to hear because it feels like blame. It is not blame. It is opportunity, because now you can see it, now you can fix it, which means the storm, in its brutal and unnecessary way, was actually useful. Third question: what would this look like from above the storm? Step out of the middle of it for a moment. Not forever, not in denial, just long enough to see the shape of it from a distance. Where is this going? What is the trajectory? If I take the best available action right now, where does this end up in 2 years, in 5? What is the version of this story where this storm turned out to be the beginning of the best chapter? Because there is always that version. There is always a version where the storm was the thing that sent you upward. The eagle knows this. Now you know it too. Chapter 4. The vision architecture. An eagle can see a rabbit from 2 miles away. Let me make that real for you, because we throw around facts like that without letting them land. 2 miles is a distance at which, with the naked human eye, you would see a blur, a suggestion of movement. You would not know it was a rabbit. You would not know it was anything. The rabbit at 2 miles is invisible to you. The eagle does not merely see it. The eagle sees the direction of its movement, the texture of the ground around it, the shadows that indicate cover, the space between the rabbit and the grass it is running toward. The eagle builds a complete picture, a full tactical map of a situation that exists, for the eagle's purposes, at a completely different scale of reality than what any ground-level creature can perceive. This is not magic, it is structure. The eagle's eye has 1 million photoreceptors per square millimeter of retina. The human eye has 200,000. The eagle is not seeing more of the same thing you see. The eagle is operating in a fundamentally different visual reality. Its eye is an entirely different instrument. And this is the 4th principle of the eagle mentality. Vision is a structure that must be built deliberately, with intention, and maintained at a resolution that most people around you will never achieve. I want to be precise about what vision means and does not mean. Vision does not mean a vague sense that things will be better. That is hope. Hope is not nothing. Hope is the thing that keeps people moving through the darkness. But hope is not vision. Hope is ground level. Vision is altitude. Vision is a specific, detailed, internally consistent picture of a future that does not yet exist, but that you are going to cause to exist. It has a resolution, a texture. You can see the details in it. You know what it looks, feels, sounds, and tastes like to be living inside that future. You know what you are wearing when you walk through the door of the thing you are building. You know what the room looks like. You know the conversation you have when the thing you are building finally works the way you knew it would work, on the morning you first decided it was possible. That specificity is not indulgence. That specificity is architecture, because the brain does not distinguish, at the level of neural pathway formation, between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. Neuroscience has established this beyond reasonable doubt at this point. The pathways that fire when you vividly imagine performing a complex skill fire in almost identical patterns to the pathways that fire when you actually perform it. Your brain, given a sufficiently detailed vision, begins to build the infrastructure for that vision. It begins to flag information as relevant that it previously ignored. It begins to see opportunities in your environment that were always there but below the threshold of attention. It begins to generate, seemingly from nowhere, in the shower, in the car, in the middle of the night, solutions to problems you have not consciously been working on. This is not mysticism. This is how the brain works when it is given a target, with sufficient resolution to lock onto. The eagle does not hunt without seeing the prey first. It does not launch without a target. It does not commit to that terrifying, irreversible dive from altitude without having already built a complete picture of the trajectory, the timing, the angle of impact. And neither should you. I want to walk you through the vision architecture, the specific process I have developed for building a vision with eagle-level resolution. It takes time, it takes honesty, It requires you to let yourself want things that feel, in the current circumstances of your life, almost embarrassingly ambitious. Start there, actually. Start with the embarrassment. If you think about the life you are trying to build, the fullest, most realized version of what you are capable of, and part of you is slightly embarrassed by how large it is, you are in the right territory. Not because size is always the right metric, but because the embarrassment is usually a sign that the vision is real enough, specific enough, ambitious enough that you are taking it seriously. Small visions do not embarrass people. Small visions are safe. Safe visions do not require eagle altitude to hold. Step 1 of the vision architecture: find the ceiling and go past it. Most people, when they allow themselves to envision a better future, unconsciously cap it at what feels possible given their current resources, current connections, current capabilities. They take the present and slightly improve it, but the eagle does not think about where it currently is when it decides where it is going. It thinks about where the prey is. It builds the flight path to the destination, and then it figures out how to fly that path. Ask yourself, if I could not fail, and resources were not the constraint, and nobody whose opinion I currently respect could see me, what would I be building? What would my life look like? What work would I be doing? What kind of person would I have become? What would I have stopped tolerating? What would I have started demanding? Write this down, in detail, with embarrassing specificity. Step 2. Find the gap honestly. The gap between where you are and where you are going is not a reason for despair. It is a map. Every element of the gap is a problem with a solution, a skill that can be developed, a resource that can be acquired, a connection that can be built. The gap is not evidence that the vision is impossible. The gap is the work, and the work is the point. Eagles do not start their dive from the target's altitude. They start from miles above it. The gap between the eagle in flight and the rabbit on the ground is not a barrier. It is the mechanism. Step 3. Reverse engineer the vision into present actions. If you have done step 1 honestly, you have a specific picture of a future version of your life. Now run it backward. What would have had to be true 5 years before you arrive at that vision? What skills would you have had? What relationships would you have built? What habits would have been in place for years? What failures would you have already been through and learned from? Keep running it backward. 10 years before, 5 years before, 1 year before, 6 months before, next month, next week. What do you need to do today that is consistent with the trajectory of a person heading toward that specific vision? Because here is the thing about trajectory that most people miss. The direction you are facing right now matters infinitely more than how far you have traveled. 2 people, one of whom has already achieved significant things but is facing backward, and one of whom has achieved nothing yet but is facing the right direction. Those 2 people are not in the same situation. The second person, despite appearances, is closer to where they want to be, because trajectory, maintained with consistency, always gets you there. Trajectory without direction, regardless of speed, just gets you somewhere. Step 4. Protect the vision from resolution decay. Visions fade. This is not weakness. This is entropy, the natural tendency of everything, including mental pictures, to deteriorate over time without active maintenance. The daily grind has a way of pulling your attention back to the immediate, to the urgent, to the ground, and every day you spend entirely at ground level without returning to altitude, your vision loses a little resolution. The eagle mentality requires a daily practice, not a long one, but a consistent one, of returning to the vision, seeing it, feeling it, walking through the details of it, asking yourself, are the actions I am about to take today consistent with the life I am building? Are they moving me toward the target or away from it? The eagle, at 7,000 feet, never loses sight of the prey. Neither should you. The secret chapter: what the eagle knows that no one teaches. Stop. I need you to be fully present for what I am about to tell you, because this is the chapter that almost did not exist. The chapter I was not going to include because it is not the kind of thing that gets written on motivational posters or spoken at graduation ceremonies or quoted in the captions of sunrise photographs on social media. This is the chapter about the thing the eagle knows that every book about eagles forgets to mention. Every 40 to 50 years, something extraordinary happens to an eagle who has lived long enough. The eagle's talons begin to grow inward, not a metaphor. Literally, the talons curve back toward the foot, losing their ability to grip, losing the precision of the weapon that has defined the eagle's survival for its entire life. The beak, which needs to be sharp and hooked to tear flesh and feed, begins to calcify and change shape, becoming thick, overgrown, unsuitable for the function it was built for. The feathers, too dense and too old, become heavy. What was once the instrument of the eagle's power has become the weight that is limiting its flight. The eagle has two options. Option 1, accept the slow diminishment. Keep flying as well as it can with talons that no longer grip perfectly, a beak that no longer tears cleanly, feathers that add weight without adding lift, a slow fade, not a sudden death but a gradual decline into a lesser version of what it was. Option 2, the great renewal. The eagle retreats to a high rock, usually alone, usually at the highest elevation it can reach, and there it does something that sounds, from the outside, like self-destruction. It beats its beak against the rock, deliberately, repeatedly, until the old beak breaks away entirely and a new one, small and sharp and correct, begins to grow in. Then, with the new beak, it pulls out its own talons one by one. This takes weeks. During this time, the eagle cannot hunt. It cannot feed itself. It is entirely vulnerable in a way it has not been since it was an eaglet in a nest. And then, with new talons, it pulls out the heavy spent feathers, systematically, completely, and waits for new ones to grow. The full process takes approximately 5 months. 5 months of total vulnerability. 5 months of looking, to any observer, like a diminished, damaged, broken version of what it was. And then it emerges with a new beak, new talons, new feathers, lighter, sharper, more precise than it has been in years. And it goes back to the sky and it flies for another 30 years. This is the secret the eagle knows that no one teaches. Transformation requires the deliberate destruction of what you have become, not the destruction of who you are. Your core, your character, your values, your capacity for love and loyalty and excellence, none of that, but the accumulated weight, the identity structures that were built for an earlier version of your life and now no longer serve. The habits that worked 10 years ago and have calcified into limitations, the beliefs about yourself and about what is possible that you formed in circumstances that no longer apply, the relationships that you have outgrown but not released, because releasing them feels like violence. All of it, the beak, the talons, the feathers, all of it has to be surrendered before the new can come in. And here, this is the thing nobody tells you. Here is where it gets genuinely, specifically, uncomfortably difficult. Because the eagle does not undergo this renewal because it feels ready. It does not wait for motivation. It does not wait until the circumstances are right, or the timing is perfect, or the people around it have given their blessing. It does it because the alternative is a slow, comfortable, dignified decline into irrelevance. The renewal hurts. The eagle is choosing the pain of transformation over the comfort of diminishment. When have you been choosing the comfort of diminishment over the pain of transformation? I need you to answer that question honestly, without the protective layer of reasonable-sounding justification, because I guarantee you have been doing it somewhere. We all have. There is not a human being alive who has not, in at least one area of their life, allowed the old beak to calcify rather than beat it against the rock. Here is how to recognize it. The areas of your life where you feel a low, persistent frustration, not acute crisis, but chronic dullness, a sense of performing rather than living, of going through motions that were once meaningful and no longer are. Those are the areas where your talons have curved inward, where your feathers have grown heavy, where what was once your strength has become your limitation. The frustration is not a problem. The frustration is the eagle looking at its own talons and understanding that it is time. Now let me tell you the part of the renewal that is never written about, because it is too dark and too honest for most inspirational content. During the 5 months in the high place, the eagle does not know that it will emerge renewed. It cannot see the new beak coming while it is bleeding from the place where the old one was. It cannot feel the new feathers growing while it is shivering from the ones it pulled out. It cannot know with certainty that what it is doing is transformation and not just damage. It is choosing to trust a process it has never completed before. It is choosing to believe that what it cannot yet see is coming. That is faith, not religious faith necessarily, though for many people the eagle mentality and their spiritual life are deeply intertwined, and I will not pretend otherwise. I mean faith in the specific sense of continuing the right action in the absence of visible evidence that the right action is working. The faith of the eagle on the rock, beating its beak against stone, with no new beak yet visible, is one of the most powerful images of transformation I have ever encountered. And it is the exact faith required of anyone who is in the middle of their own renewal. If you are in the middle of yours right now, if you are in the 5 months on the high rock, without a beak, without talons, unable to hunt, unable to feed yourself in the ways you used to, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are becoming. The new beak is already growing. You just cannot feel it yet. Keep beating against the rock. There is a second secret in this chapter, and it is this one. The eagle never goes to the rock to renew because its life is going perfectly. The renewal is always triggered by the recognition of limitation, by the honest assessment that what brought it here is not enough to take it further, by the wisdom to understand that clinging to the old form, the old identity, the old tools, the old version of itself, is a choice that leads in only one direction. You have to want to be new more than you want to be comfortable. You have to want the sky more than you want the rock. This is not given to everyone. Some people reach the rock and turn back. They look at what the renewal will cost, the temporary helplessness, the lost identity, the uncertainty of the becoming, and they decide the current version is good enough. They go back down. They live in the diminishment. There is no judgment in that choice. The diminishment is often comfortable, often surrounded by people who love the current version of you and are not sure they want the new one, often rewarded in the short term by the systems and structures around you that were built for what you currently are. But you are listening to this. You found this. That is not an accident. You are already on the rock. The only question is whether you will stay. Stay. Chapter 5. The patience of a predator. Most people are terrible at waiting, not because they are impatient by nature, though some are, but because they have been trained by a world that delivers everything at the speed of a tap on a screen to experience any meaningful delay as evidence of failure. If it is taking this long, something must be wrong. If it has not happened yet, it probably will not happen. If the prey is not responding to the dive must have been the wrong move. The eagle does not think like this, ever. An eagle on a thermal will circle for hours, genuinely hours, waiting for the exact moment when the conditions align with the capabilities it has and the target it has chosen. It is not wasted time, it is not passive time, it is the most sophisticated kind of active work, the work of sustained readiness, of maintained altitude, of keeping the prey in sight without breaking the patience that makes the strike possible. There is a specific psychological state the eagle occupies during this wait. It is not hope, it is not doubt, it is not the anxious back and forth between wanting the moment to come and fearing it will not. The eagle is simply present with the process, fully alive in the circle, completely committed to being ready when the moment arrives, without making the moment's arrival the condition of its okayness. That psychological state, what I call predator patience, is one of the rarest and most valuable qualities a human being can develop. Let me tell you about James. James was 35 when he started building what he believed was going to be his life's work, a platform for independent creators that would solve a problem he had experienced personally and that he knew, with a clarity that he could not fully justify rationally, but that he trusted completely, was a problem millions of people were experiencing. He had no funding. He had a day job that paid the bills and ate 45 hours of his week. He had 2 children under 5. He had a supportive partner who was also exhausted. He built it anyway, in the early mornings before anyone in his house was awake. In the late evenings, after the children were in bed and the dishes were done and every reasonable human instinct in his body was saying sleep. He built it in the cracks of a life that was not designed to have a creative project in it. 18 months in, nothing had happened. The platform had 300 users. A friend who worked in venture capital told him kindly that the market was already saturated and that he should consider cutting his losses. His brother asked, at a Christmas dinner, when he was going to give up on the website thing. James did not give up on the website thing. He circled. Month 22. A small but influential newsletter mentioned the platform in passing, not as a recommendation, just as an example of a trend they were observing. James's user count doubled in a week. He was not ready for that. He scrambled. He learned. He fixed the things that broke under the load of new attention. Month 31. A larger media outlet did a profile. User count went from 3,000 to 40,000 in a month. He was not ready for that either. He scrambled more. He learned more. Month 40. The platform was acquired for a number that James does not share publicly, but that made the 3 years of early mornings and late evenings look, in retrospect, like the most lucrative investment he had ever made. Here is what James told me when I asked him how he maintained the patience during the 18 months when nothing was happening. He said, "I decided that the waiting was part of the work, not a break from the work, not a pause between the work, but the actual work of proving to myself that I believed in this enough to stay in it when there was no evidence that I should. I figured that if I could not stay patient during the years when nothing was happening, I had no right to expect anything to happen." Predator patience, the circle above the prey, the maintained altitude, the complete absence of panic about the timing. There is a second dimension of predator patience that is harder to talk about because it requires confronting a belief that most achievement-oriented people carry without examining. The belief is this: I will be ready when the moment comes. The problem is not with the belief. The problem is with the when. Because most people, when they say they will be ready when the moment comes, mean that they will begin preparing when they can see the moment approaching. They will start building the skills, having the conversations, developing the capabilities when the opportunity becomes visible. The eagle does not wait until the rabbit appears to develop its diving speed. The eagle's diving speed is already fully developed, already tested, already trusted, long before any specific rabbit enters the picture. When the moment comes, the eagle does not need to prepare. The eagle only needs to commit. This is the principle of permanent readiness, and it means that the time between now and the moment you are waiting for is not waiting time, it is preparation time. It is the time when you are becoming the version of yourself that will be equal to the opportunity when it arrives. What skills are you not developing yet because you are waiting for the opportunity that would make developing them feel necessary? What conversations are you not having yet because the relationship where they would matter has not arrived yet? What version of yourself are you waiting to become because you are waiting for conditions that will make becoming it feel safe? The eagle mentality says, become it now, build it now, develop it now, so that when the moment comes, and it comes for everyone who stays in the circle, you do not need time to prepare, you only need the courage to dive. Chapter 6. The territory of the eagle. Eagles do not share territory. This is not aggression for its own sake. It is precision resource management. An eagle's territory, the range it hunts, defends, and considers its domain, is calibrated with almost mathematical accuracy to the minimum area needed to support itself and its offspring. It does not claim more than it needs, but it will defend what it needs with absolute ferocity. Boundary setting, in the language of the eagle mentality, is not a self-help concept. It is a survival mechanism. It is the practical management of the resources, your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional capacity, that are required for you to operate at the altitude the eagle inside you demands. And here is the thing about boundaries that most people get wrong. They think of boundaries as walls, as defensive structures, as the thing you build to keep people out. That is not an eagle's territory. That is a chicken coop. An eagle's territory is not a wall. It is a clarity. It is the eagle knowing exactly what space it requires, exactly what it will and will not tolerate within that space, and communicating that with absolute unambiguity, not through aggression but through consistency. The eagle does not explain its territory to every bird that approaches it. It does not apologize for having a territory. It does not wonder if claiming a territory makes it a bad eagle. It simply knows what the territory is, and when another creature enters it, the eagle's response is clear, immediate, and non-negotiable. That is what a boundary actually is. It is not a wall. It is a clarity. And the reason most people struggle with boundaries has nothing to do with the other people in their lives. It has to do with the fact that they have not yet been fully honest with themselves about what their territory actually is. I want you to think about 3 specific areas where your territory has been invaded, where the space you need to function at your best has been occupied by something or someone that is consuming resources you need for the flight you are trying to make. The first area, your time. Time is the resource that determines everything else. It is the only non-renewable one. Money can be made again, energy can be restored, skills can be developed. Time spent cannot be reclaimed under any circumstances by any means. And yet most people guard their money more carefully than they guard their time. They will negotiate a price, will comparison shop, will decline an expense that does not deliver value, and then spend 3 hours in a meeting that could have been a 5-sentence email, or 2 hours in a conversation that left them feeling drained and gave them nothing, or an entire Sunday in a social obligation they accepted because refusing felt uncomfortable. Where is your time going that it should not be going? The eagle mentality demands that you answer this question not with generalities but with specifics. Not I waste time on social media, but I spend 40 minutes in the morning before I have done anything that matters, consuming content that neither informs nor inspires me and that I will not remember by noon. That specificity is what makes correction possible. The second area, your energy. Energy is finite. Not just physical energy, the obvious kind that exercise and sleep and nutrition affect, cognitive energy, emotional energy, the capacity to be fully present, to do genuinely excellent thinking, to engage with something difficult with everything you have. Every high-quality output requires high-quality input. Every eagle that makes a perfect strike has maintained its energy for hours, soaring on thermals, conserving the explosive power for the moment it is needed. If you are spending your best energy on the things that deserve your worst, and arriving at the things that matter most already depleted, you are not a strategic problem. You are an energy allocation problem. What is consuming energy you need for something else? And here, this is where it gets uncomfortable. Some of what is consuming your energy is probably a relationship, not a bad person, perhaps someone you love. But love and energetic compatibility are not the same thing. There are people you love genuinely and deeply who consistently leave you depleted after spending time with them. That depletion is information. It does not mean the relationship needs to end, but it means the relationship needs to be managed with territory clarity, with the eagle's understanding of what space it needs and what it cannot afford to give away. The third area, your attention. Your attention is the thing your vision lives in. Without sustained, protected, deliberate attention on the things that matter most to you, the vision I talked about in Chapter 4 will decay Not immediately, not in a day, not in a week, but over months of scattered, context-switching, notification-saturated attention, your most important mental work will become impossible, not because you lack the intelligence or the will, but because the instrument required for that work, deep, sustained, focused attention, has been damaged by chronic misuse. There is a body of research now that indicates that deep focus, the kind required for genuinely excellent creative and intellectual work, cannot be achieved in sessions of less than a certain minimum duration, and that every significant interruption resets the clock. The eagle circling at altitude cannot afford to break its focus every 3 minutes to check whether something interesting has happened on the ground. The eagle's focus is total. It is the focus of a creature whose survival depends on seeing what it is looking for before anything else in the environment captures its attention. Protect your attention like territory, because it is. Chapter 7. The Weight of the Dead. This chapter is about the thing you are carrying that you should have put down years ago. I want to tell you about the marabou stork. The marabou stork is one of the largest flying birds in Africa, with a wingspan that rivals the eagle's, and it spends most of its life doing something the eagle would never do, eating the dead. It is a scavenger, a carrion bird, and it has adapted so completely to this function that its head is bald, because feathers would get in the way of reaching inside carcasses, and it has a long, distensible throat pouch used for regulating heat, which gives it the appearance of carrying something heavy and inflated around its neck wherever it goes. The marabou stork can fly. It is a large, powerful bird, and it can achieve significant altitude. But it spends almost all of its life on the ground, at the sight of things that have already died, consuming what was alive and is no longer. Now, I am not using this as a metaphor to call anyone a marabou stork. I am using it to ask a precise question. What dead things are you still eating? Old grievances, old failures, old stories about yourself that were formed in conditions that no longer apply, old wounds that you have kept fresh and feeding through the daily act of returning to them, examining them, telling their story to yourself and sometimes to others, maintaining them at a level of aliveness that keeps you at the site of the carcass rather than lifting you toward the sky. The weight of dead things is the most underestimated weight a person carries. It does not feel like weight at first. It feels like identity. It feels like the story of who you are and what has been done to you and why the world is the shape it is. It feels like the honest, accurate account of a life that has had real difficulty in it. And some of the story is genuinely true, genuinely necessary, genuinely part of the architecture of who you have become. But some of it is keeping you on the ground. Let me be specific about the categories. The first category is resentment. Resentment is the act of continuing to drink the poison of someone else's wrong action. I do not mean the initial pain of betrayal, of injustice, of being let down by someone you trusted is real and must be felt. But resentment is what happens after the initial pain, when instead of processing the wound and moving forward, you build the wound into a permanent feature of your internal landscape. You visit it, you maintain it, you use it as evidence in an ongoing trial that nobody else is attending. The person you resent has, in almost all cases, moved on. They are not thinking about you. They are not lying awake at night aware of the trial you are running against them. They are living their life, however badly you judge that life to be lived, and they are entirely unaffected by the weight you are carrying on their behalf. The resentment is yours. The weight is yours, and putting it down is an act you do entirely for yourself, not for them. The eagle holds no resentment, not because it is wise in a philosophical sense, it is a bird, but because resentment is a function of a cognitive system that is also responsible for vision, attention, and altitude. You cannot use the same mental resource for resentment and for eagle-level vision simultaneously, one or the other. The eagle chooses vision. The second category is identity debt. Identity debt is the collection of identities you carry that were formed by your past but are no longer accurate. I am not good with money, formed at 22 when you made genuinely terrible financial decisions and reinforced every year since, even as your actual financial literacy has grown. I am not someone who finishes things, formed from 3 projects you abandoned and used ever since to preemptively justify the abandonment of every subsequent project before it even begins. I am the kind of person who is one of the most powerful sentences in your mental vocabulary, and most people have filled in the blank with limitations that were formed decades ago under circumstances that no longer apply, and they carry those limitations faithfully like items in a trunk that they lugged from every childhood home to every adult residence, never opening the trunk, never examining whether the contents are still relevant, just carrying it because the trunk has always been there. Open the trunk, examine what is in it, because some of it is treasure, real elements of identity that have served you and will continue to serve you, that are foundational and worth carrying. But some of it is dead weight. Some of it is the old beak that needs to be beaten against the rock before the new one can grow. The third category is the weight of other people's opinions. This one is subtle because it is legitimate to care what others think. Social intelligence, the ability to understand and respond appropriately to how others perceive you, is a genuine asset. Eagles are social creatures in important ways. But there is a catastrophic difference between intelligently factoring in others' perspectives and structuring your entire life around the management of others' opinions. Most people carry, at the most fundamental level of their decision-making, a question that is never spoken but is always present. What will people think of this? Not what is the right move, not what is consistent with my vision, not what will I be proud of, but what will people think? And specifically, and this is the most destructive version of it, what will the people who have already decided what to think of me think of this? Because there are people in your life who have formed a fixed idea of who you are. Some of them love that fixed idea. Some of them are invested in it. Some of them would be significantly disrupted, in ways that have nothing to do with you personally, by the evidence that the fixed idea is wrong, that you are larger than they thought, capable of more than they believed, going somewhere they did not predict. Their opinion of your ceiling is not your ceiling. Their surprise at your altitude is not evidence that you flew too high. Let them be surprised, put down what they think, and fly. Chapter 8. The Architecture of Iron. An eagle's hollow bones are stronger, pound for pound, than solid steel. This is not a metaphor. This is material science. The interior of a bird bone is a lattice, a 3-dimensional web of structural struts arrayed at precisely the angles required to distribute load most efficiently, with void space filling everything the structure does not need. The result is a material that achieves maximum strength at minimum weight. A solid bone of the same size would be far heavier and only marginally stronger. The lattice bone is the engineering solution to the problem of being a flying predator. You need to be strong enough to hit a moving target at terminal velocity and light enough to achieve and maintain altitude. Strength and lightness are not opposites. Built correctly, they are the same thing. This is the architecture of iron, the eagle mentality's model for building a self that is both structurally powerful and free from unnecessary weight. And I want to spend this chapter on the specific habits and practices that build that architecture in a human life. Because we have spent 7 chapters on principles, and the principles mean nothing without the practices. The first structural practice is the elimination of the 0 day. A 0 day is a day on which you move 0 distance toward your most important goals. 0, not backwards, neutral. A day that, from the perspective of the person you are becoming, might as well not have happened. 0 days are more destructive than bad days. On a bad day, you make mistakes, you face setbacks, you struggle, but you are engaged with the work of your life. On a 0 day, you are not. And 0 days have a dangerous property. They create momentum of their own. 1 0 day makes the next one feel acceptable. 3 0 days in a row, and you have lost the rhythm. A week of 0 days and the vision has started to fade, the habits have started to erode, and the distance between where you are and where you are going feels, suddenly, greater than it felt before. The solution to the 0 day is not heroics. It is not the demand that you produce your best work every day, because that is neither possible nor sustainable. The solution is the minimum viable commitment, the smallest action that counts as movement. On the days when you have an hour to give an hour. On the days when you have 10 minutes, give 10 minutes and make those 10 minutes real. On the days when 10 minutes seems impossible, do one thing, one email, one paragraph, one push-up, one page. The continuity is the thing, the chain is the thing. The eagle mentality does not require that every day be extraordinary. It requires that every day be pointed in the right direction. The second structural practice is the active protection of recovery. Here is something that the culture of relentless productivity never tells you, because it is not useful to the people who want you to work more. Rest is not the opposite of performance. Rest is a component of performance. It is not what you do when you stop performing. It is what makes sustained performance possible. Eagles sleep. Eagles play. There is fascinating footage of eagles engaging in what can only be described as aerial play, diving at each other, locking talons in mid-air and free-falling together before breaking apart and soaring upward again. Eagles spend time simply being present in their territory without hunting, without patrolling, without performing any obvious function. This is not laziness. This is the management of a high-performance biological system, which is what you are. The athlete who trains without adequate recovery gets injured. The executive who does not sleep makes worse decisions than the exhausted factory worker who slept 8 hours. The creative who never rests produces work that reflects the exhaustion, flatter, less surprising, less genuinely alive. Protecting your recovery is an act of ambition, not an act of rest. The third structural practice is the discipline of the single most important thing. In any given day, there is one task, one action, one conversation, one decision, one piece of work that matters more than everything else on the list combined. Not because the other things do not matter, but because this one thing is the one that is actually pointed at the center of your vision. This is the work that, done well and consistently over time, moves the entire architecture of your life toward where you are trying to go. The eagle mentality demands that this task happen first, not when you are warm and in the flow of the day, not after the emails are cleared, first, before the reactive demands of the day have consumed the best of what you have, before the urgency of other people's needs has displaced the importance of your own most critical work. This practice is known by various names in various productivity frameworks. In the eagle mentality, I call it leading with the kill. You hunt your most important prey when your energy and focus are at their peak, with the patience and precision we talked about in Chapter 5. You do not save it for later. Later is when the storm hits. Later is when the phone rings. Later is when the day is already spent, and the best you can offer is the depleted version of yourself. Lead with the kill. Every day, without exception, the fourth structural practice is the construction of what I call the nest. The eagle's nest, the eyrie, is an extraordinary engineering achievement. Eagles return to the same nest year after year, adding to it each season, reinforcing it, improving it. Some eagle nests have been in continuous use for decades, growing to weights of thousands of pounds and dimensions of several meters in every direction. They are built in places that are difficult to reach, that offer clear sightlines in every direction, that cannot be approached without being seen. The nest is the eagle's environment of safety, of regeneration, of raising the next generation. And the eagle mentality asks you to build your equivalent. Your nest is the environment you deliberately construct to support the life you are trying to live. It is your physical space, the state of your home, your workspace, the physical conditions in which you do your best thinking. It is your relational space, the people who form the core circle of your life, the people with whom you regenerate rather than deplete. It is your informational space, the books, the ideas, the content that feeds your thinking rather than numbing it. It is your spiritual space, whatever that means for you specifically, the dimension of life that connects you to something larger, than the immediate demands of any given day. Most people spend no deliberate time building their nest. They live in environments that happen to them, rather than environments they chose, and then they wonder why returning home does not restore them, why they arrive home from the demands of the world and do not feel the specific peace of the eagle arriving at altitude in a carefully built place that was constructed specifically for them. Build your nest with intention, with specificity, with the understanding that the environment you live in is not a neutral backdrop to your life. It is an active participant in every decision you make, every habit you maintain, every version of yourself you become. Chapter 9. The Loyalty Code. Eagles mate for life. This is stated frequently in the context of eagle mythology, and it is worth examining specifically because the romantic framing often obscures the more interesting and more instructive reality. Eagle pairs do not mate for life because they are sentimental. They mate for life because the demands of raising eagles are so extreme. The nest construction, the hunting, the 45-day incubation, the intensive months of raising eaglets who require constant feeding and protection, that a partnership built on deep familiarity, established trust and synchronized capability is not a luxury, it is an operational necessity. The loyalty of eagles is not emotional decoration, it is structural intelligence. And this is the chapter about the people, the specific, chosen, irreplaceable few who are part of the architecture of your eagle life. Let me start with a distinction that I think is one of the most important in this entire book. There is a difference between people who celebrate your results and people who are committed to your growth. People who celebrate your results are wonderful to have in your life. They cheer when things go well. They share your successes. They make the moments of arrival feel real and worth having. Never underestimate the value of genuine celebration. The eagle that returns to the nest after a successful hunt does not return alone, and the reunion at the nest is not nothing. But people who are committed to your growth will tell you when your beak is calcifying. They will tell you when your vision has gotten small. They will be in the room when you are on the rock, when you are in the 5 months of the renewal, without talons, unable to hunt, not to fix it, not to crack your shell open for you, but to be present with the truth of it and not pretend it is not happening. These people are rare. If you have 3 of them in your life, you are extraordinarily wealthy in a currency that will never devalue. The eagle mentality says, find these people, become worthy of these people, and then commit to them with the totality of the eagle's pair bond, not because it is romantic, but because the work you are both doing demands it. There is a second dimension of the loyalty code that is harder because it requires a kind of love that often feels like its opposite. The eagle pair will sometimes push their eaglets out of the nest before the eaglets feel ready, literally. The parents will remove the soft bedding from the nest, the fur, the feathers, the comfortable lining, leaving only the sharp, uncomfortable sticks beneath. And then, if the eaglet still refuses to attempt flight, a parent will sometimes physically tip the eaglet over the edge, and the eaglet falls. And then the most extraordinary thing happens. Because falling is falling, and the wind is the wind, and the body of the eaglet, which has been built for exactly this, responds to both. The wings open, instinct activates, and what looked like an act of cruelty is revealed as the act of love it always was. The parent knowing what the child needed before the child could know it, and doing the hard thing that the hard love required. True loyalty sometimes looks like the push. The most loyal people in your life are not always the ones who tell you what you want to hear. They are not always the ones who maintain peace when peace is comfortable and confrontation is necessary. They are not always the ones who let you stay in the nest because you are scared of the edge. Sometimes the most loyal act another person can perform is to tell you, with love and with directness and with absolute clarity, that you are living below what you are capable of, that you have been in the nest too long, that the life you are living is not the life you are built for, that they love you too much to keep pretending they do not see what they see. Have you been pushed by someone who loved you? Have you pushed someone you love? And the harder question, is there someone in your life right now who needs the push, who is sitting in the nest of a lesser life, picking at the comfortable bedding, afraid of the edge, and you have been too gentle to give it to them. Eagles love fiercely. Eagles push fiercely. These are not contradictions. They are the same thing. The third element of the loyalty code is loyalty to yourself, and this is the most neglected form of loyalty in most people's lives, because it requires a level of self-knowledge and self-honesty that is genuinely difficult to achieve and genuinely uncomfortable to maintain. Loyalty to yourself means keeping the promises you make to yourself with the same seriousness you bring to the promises you make to others. It means treating your vision with the same respect you treat a commitment to someone you love. It means showing up for your own most important work with the same reliability you bring to showing up for the people who depend on you. Because here is what happens when you are chronically disloyal to yourself. When you repeatedly set an intention and don't keep it, promise yourself something, and then let that promise dissolve quietly, without consequence. Declare that this time will be different, and then allow the comfortable pull of the familiar to undo the declaration. What happens is not just the specific thing you failed to do. What happens is a deep, cumulative erosion of your own trustworthiness to yourself. And when you cannot trust yourself to keep your own commitments, the most important kind of confidence, not the performance confidence, not the social confidence, but the bedrock certainty that you will do what you say you will do when it actually costs something, is gone. You cannot fly from a foundation you don't trust. Be loyal to yourself first, then give that loyalty, fully and ferociously, to the few who deserve it. Chapter 10. The Dark Thermals. Not all lifts are sunshine. In the world of thermal soaring, there are what pilots call rotor zones, areas of severe, unpredictable turbulence that exist in the lee of mountains, in the mixing layers between warm and cold air masses, in the transitions between stable and unstable atmospheric conditions. These zones are dangerous. They are disorienting. The normal reference points stop working. Up feels like down. The instruments that work in normal conditions give confusing readings. The strategies that serve you in clean air become liabilities in rotor. Even eagles, even birds with 1 million photoreceptors per square millimeter of retina and a lifetime of atmospheric intelligence, encounter conditions that test the absolute limit of their capability, and those conditions are not optional. The dark thermals come for everyone who is trying to fly at altitude. This chapter is about the specific forms of difficulty that are unique to the high-level life, the challenges that do not exist at ground level, that appear specifically because you have climbed, specifically because you are attempting something that matters, specifically because you are in territory that most people never enter. The first dark thermal is success itself. Success is one of the most reliable destroyers of the habits and hungers that produced it. This is not a paradox. It is a psychological mechanism. The drive to achieve is partially fueled by discomfort, by the gap between where you are and where you want to be, by the friction of insufficiency, the creative tension of unfinished aspiration. When success arrives, when the gap closes, when the goal is achieved, when the thing you have been working toward is finally real, that tension releases. That release feels like victory. It is victory, but it is also, if you are not aware of it, the beginning of the conditions that will make your next ascent harder. The eagle that has just made a successful kill does not stop being an eagle. It does not decide that because it was successful today, tomorrow's hunt can be approached with less precision. The kill feeds the eagle's current need, but the eagle remains the eagle, alert, altitude maintaining, constantly developing the skills and the conditions for the next hunt. How do you remain the eagle after you get what you were hunting? The answer is the vision architecture from Chapter 4, but applied after arrival rather than before it. The moment you achieve a significant goal, the question is not how do I enjoy this? You should absolutely enjoy it. Celebration matters. The eagle's return to the nest matters. The question is, what does this make possible that was not possible before? What is the next altitude from which I can see farther? The second dark thermal is identity fragmentation. When you are building a life that is meaningfully different from the life of the people around you, different from the life of your community, your family of origin, the social group you grew up in, you will at some point experience a specific kind of disorientation that is not about the work and is not about the vision. It is about who you are now, that you are no longer entirely who you were. This is genuinely disorienting, and I want to name it precisely so that when it comes for you, if it has not already, you recognize it as a passage, not a pathology. You will sit at a family dinner and feel like a visitor to a life that used to be native. You will have a conversation with a childhood friend and notice, with a sadness that has nothing to do with love, you still love them, that the world you are living in and the world they are living in have diverged in ways that are not easily bridged. You will look at the person you were 5 years ago and feel a complicated combination of affection and grief, and something you can only call distance. This is not arrogance, it is not abandonment, it is the necessary disorientation of genuine growth, the eagle that completes its renewal, the full 5 months on the rock, the new beak, the new talons, the new feathers, looks in some fundamental way different when it returns to the sky. Not unrecognizably different, but different. And the world it returns to is the same world. But the eagle in it is not the same eagle. That difference is not a loss, even though it sometimes feels like one. Hold both. The grief of what you have left behind and the reality of what you are becoming. Both are true. Both are part of the passage. The third dark thermal is the trap of arrival. The trap of arrival is the belief, often unconscious, that achieving a certain level of success, recognition, or capability will make everything okay. Not better, okay. That there is a threshold of achievement beyond which the internal work is complete, beyond which the old wounds stop mattering, beyond which you will simply feel at last sufficient. There is no such threshold. This is not despair, this is liberation. Because if there is no arrival, if there is no finished product, no completed version of yourself that you finally become and get to be forever, then you are free from the tyranny of the destination. The journey is not a means to an end. The journey is the life. The eagle does not arrive at being an eagle. It is an eagle in every moment of flight, of hunting, of circling, of renewing on the rock. The excellence is not the destination. The excellence is the practice. Practice, not arrival. Flight, not landing. Chapter 11. The Silent Hunt. There is a way of doing great things that most people will never see. The eagle's dive is visible. The talons at impact are visible. The moment of the kill, spectacular, dramatic. The footage that ends up on nature documentaries is visible. What is not filmed is the 6 hours of high-altitude circling that preceded it. The 2 miles of sustained observation. The patient, invisible, solitary work of the hunt before the hunt. This chapter is about the silent work, the work that does not photograph well, the work that happens before anyone is watching, the work that is in many ways the most important work, the work that makes all the visible results possible, and yet the work that receives no acknowledgement, no applause, no confirmation from the world that it is happening or that it matters. We live in a culture that has become pathologically oriented toward the visible, toward the demonstrable, toward the shareable, a culture in which increasingly the question, "Did you do the work?" is being quietly replaced by the question, "Can you show that you did the work?" And the work that cannot be shown, the slow reading, the deep thinking, the private practice, the years of building capability before any capability is visible, is beginning to feel, to many people, like it doesn't count. It counts more than anything else. Every capability you admire in a person who seems to do extraordinary things naturally, the writer whose sentences seem effortless, the executive who makes complex decisions with apparent ease, the athlete who performs under pressure in ways that seem to defy the pressure, was built in the silent hunt, in the thousands of hours before the performance, in the private repetition, in the practice that was not for anyone, that had no audience, that produced nothing shareable. The eagle mentality requires a specific kind of relationship with the silent work, one of complete non-attachment to its recognition, not indifference. You are doing the work because it is genuinely important, because it is building something that matters, but non-attachment to whether anyone else knows you are doing it, non-attachment to whether the invisible work produces visible results on any particular timeline, non-attachment to the question of whether the circling at altitude is being observed or applauded by anyone on the ground, because it is not, and it does not need to be. I want to tell you about a writer. She will remain unnamed because she asked to be, who spent 11 years working on a single novel. 11 years. She had a day job she kept the entire time. She had a family she showed up for every day while maintaining a private practice of writing that her family barely knew the depth of. She wrote approximately 1.4 million words in those 11 years. The finished novel was 93,000 words. The rest was the silent hunt, the circling, the observation, the development of a capability and a story that were both over 11 years finding their final form. When the novel was published, it received immediate recognition. Reviews described her writing as uniquely mature, with a quality of observation that most writers take decades to develop. She was described in several reviews as a remarkable new voice. A remarkable new voice. 11 years in the making, 1.4 million words of private practice, and the world, seeing only the published work, called her new. She was not new. She was 11 years deep. That is the silent hunt. That is what makes the visible result possible. Do your 11 years, quietly, completely, without needing anyone to know. The result will speak louder than any announcement. Chapter 12. The Communion of Eagles. There is a phenomenon observed by wildlife researchers studying bald eagles that changes how you understand these birds entirely. During certain migration seasons, bald eagles gather in numbers. Not pairs, not families, not the isolated solitary hunters of eagle mythology. Hundreds of eagles, sometimes thousands, using the same updraft columns over the same mountain ranges, riding the same thermals in loose spiraling groups that fill the sky with something that looks, from a distance, like a slow living tornado of wings. They call it a kettle. Each eagle is still hunting alone, still maintaining its own trajectory, its own altitude, its own precision. The kettle is not a flock in the way that starlings move. It is not a coordinated, synchronized unit with a collective intelligence. It is hundreds of sovereign, independent, highly capable individuals who have discovered that this particular thermal, on this particular day, provides enough lift for all of them simultaneously. They are not diminished by each other's presence. They are not competing for the same thermal. There is enough for everyone. Each eagle is being itself, at altitude, at full capability, and the fact that hundreds of others are doing the same thing nearby is neither an obstacle nor a distraction. It is simply what it looks like when many eagles are at altitude at the same time. This is the model for community in the eagle mentality, and it is radically different from the models most people operate with. Most people experience community as a negotiation with altitude. The people around them form a kind of gravitational field, a shared level of expectation, achievement, comfort, ambition, and departing significantly from that level requires either leaving the community or managing the tension between your altitude and theirs. This is real. This is not something to pretend away. The communities we are born into, and many of the communities we choose, were not built for eagle-level altitude. They were built for survival, for belonging, for the maintenance of a shared life at a level accessible to everyone in the group. They are not bad. They are not lesser. They are what they are. But they cannot always accommodate the thermal that will take you to where you need to go. The eagle mentality asks you to find your kettle, to find the other eagles, the people who are at altitude or are determinedly climbing to altitude, who have found their thermal or are searching for theirs, and to be in proximity to them, not to become them, not to match their trajectory or their specific hunt, but to share the same lift. Because something happens in a kettle that cannot happen in isolation. The sight of hundreds of eagles circling the same thermal confirms something that solo flight cannot confirm, that altitude is possible, that the thermal is real, that the effort required to reach it is worth making because others have reached it and are using it and are not falling. The kettle is evidence, and evidence, when you are in the exhausting, faith-dependent work of climbing, matters more than you know. Where is your kettle? Who are the people whose mere existence in your life, whose presence in the same room, in the same industry, in the same pursuit, confirms that the altitude you are climbing toward is not imaginary? Find them. Build a relationship of mutual lift with them, not a transactional one, not the networking event version of connection, where every relationship is assessed for its immediate utility and discarded when the utility runs out. The real kind, the kind built on genuine respect and genuine interest, and the shared recognition that you are both trying to do something difficult and important and are better off knowing each other than not. The kettle, the communion of eagles. You were not built to fly alone forever. Chapter 13. The kill shot. Everything in this book has been building toward this chapter. Not the kill in the predatory sense, not aggression for its own sake, not dominance as an end in itself, but the moment of absolute total commitment. The moment when the eagle, having climbed to altitude, having circled with patience, having maintained perfect observation, having read every relevant variable, having waited for the exact configuration of conditions that makes the action possible, folds its wings and falls. There is no going back from the fold. The eagle in its dive is committed, completely, irreversibly. At the speed it achieves in the terminal dive, hesitation is not a pause, it is impact at the wrong angle, with the wrong force, missing the target by the margin of a flinch. The dive requires the totality of the eagle's capability and the totality of the eagle's will simultaneously. This is the chapter about commitment, and I want to start with the hardest truth about commitment, which is this. Most people confuse intention with commitment and spend their lives in the gap between them. Intention is the wing lift. Intention is the climb to altitude. Intention is the circling, the observation, the development of the plan. Intention is necessary. Intention is valuable. Without intention, the eagle never gets to altitude, never finds the prey, never lines up the shot. But intention without commitment is an eagle that circles forever. There comes a moment when the conditions are as good as they are going to be, not perfect, never perfect, but as aligned as they are likely to be, and the decision must be made. Not a decision to try, not a decision to see what happens, a decision to go, a decision to fold the wings. And what I want to tell you about that moment, because I have watched it in hundreds of people, have lived through it myself in the moments that mattered most in my own life, is that it never feels ready. The conditions never feel optimal enough to warrant the fold. There is always another variable to resolve, another preparation to make, another reason to circle just a little longer. The eagles that never fold never eat. I want to tell you about the specific anatomy of commitment, because understanding it changes how you approach the fold. Commitment is not a feeling. I know we often talk about it as though it is, I feel committed to this, but that framing is dangerous because feelings change with circumstances and conditions and mood, and if your commitment lives in the feeling of commitment, it will last exactly as long as the feeling does. Commitment is a structure. It is a decision made in advance about how you will behave in specific future circumstances before those circumstances arrive, before you know how you will feel when they do arrive. The eagle did not decide to commit to the dive at the moment of the dive. The eagle's entire physiological and behavioral preparation, the climb to altitude, the thermal riding, the observation pattern, is commitment expressed in action, built in advance, so that at the moment of the fold, the question of whether to fold has already been answered. You build commitment in advance by making decisions that make other decisions unnecessary. You decide once that you will write every morning before the family wakes, and then you do not decide again every morning whether to write. You decide once that you will not respond to certain categories of request after a certain hour, and then you do not decide again in the moment of each request whether to respond. You decide once that you will finish what you start on anything that has passed a certain threshold of importance, and then you do not negotiate with yourself when the middle of the project feels hard. Decision architecture, built in advance, so that the moment of execution is not a moment of decision, but a moment of expression, the expression of who you already are, already decided, already committed. This is the architecture of the fold. Now, I want to ask you something personal. What is the fold you have been preparing for, but have not yet made? What is the thing you have been circling, month after month, year after year, at altitude above, with observation and patience and preparation, but without the final commitment to go? Because you know what it is. You have known what it is for a long time. The book you have been researching but not writing, the business you have been modeling but not starting, the conversation you have been drafting but not having, the life you have been building toward but not stepping into, because stepping into it would mean stepping away from the life you are currently in, and that stepping away costs something real, something you are not yet sure you are willing to pay. The prey has been in your sights for a long time. The conditions are as aligned as they are going to be. Your wings are already folded in the part of you that knows. Fall. Chapter 14. The Ascent Without End. This is the last chapter, and I need it to feel like what it actually is, which is not an ending, because the eagle mentality does not have endings in the traditional sense. No arrival, no finished state, no flag planted on a peak that you now get to stand on forever, looking down. It has a sense, continuous, never completed, always demanding ascents into successive altitudes that were invisible from where you were before. Altitudes that become visible only once you have reached the previous one, which is why the journey cannot be fully mapped in advance, and why everyone who tries to map it for you before you have made it is giving you at best a partial picture. But I want to give you something in this final chapter that is both honest about the difficulty and honest about the reward. Let me tell you about the last season of the eagle that has lived longest. The eagle that has gone through every renewal, has survived every storm, has found and lost and found again the altitude. That eagle, in its final years, does something that younger eagles never do. It teaches, not explicitly. Eagles do not have language, do not hold seminars, do not gather younger birds and transmit explicit knowledge, but the eagle that has lived longest occupies a specific presence in its territory that is qualitatively different from the presence of younger birds. Other eagles watch it. They observe its flight patterns, its hunting decisions, its responses to weather, its choices of thermal. The accumulated embodied wisdom of decades becomes a kind of broadcast, visible not in any single act, but in the total pattern of a life lived at the highest level for the longest time. There is something in you that wants to live that kind of life, not the life of the admired performer, not the life of the person who is pointed at for their accomplishments, the life of the eagle that has been through every altitude, every storm, every renewal, every dark thermal, and that has arrived at the place where the altitude is not an effort anymore but a home, where the flight is not a performance but a nature. That is what this is all building toward, not a result, a nature. And I want to close this book not with instructions or frameworks or the final insight that makes everything else click into place, because there is no such insight, and anyone who promises you one is selling you something that does not exist. I want to close it with the truth of the sky. The sky is not a metaphor for freedom. It is freedom's physical expression in the world of the eagle. The sky is the place where the eagle is most itself, most capable, most alive, most fully expressing every adaptation, every capability, every instinct that has been building in its lineage for 60 million years. You have a sky, not the same one. Your sky is made of the specific work you are building, the specific relationships you are committed to, the specific version of excellent that is available to you and only to you, because it is shaped by the precise configuration of your history, your capabilities, your wounds, your gifts, your particular way of seeing. Nobody else's sky is your sky, which means nobody else's flight is your flight, which means comparisons, as tempting as they are, as culturally embedded as they are, as automatic as the reflex to compare yourself to others who seem to be flying higher or faster or more elegantly, are not information, they are noise. They are the ground-level perspective trying to tell you something about a sky it has never seen. You are not competing with other eagles. You are becoming yourself, completely, irreversibly, at the altitude your nature demands. And here is what I know about you, what I have known since the first word of this book, what I want to leave you with as the last words reach you. You did not find this by accident. People who are satisfied with the ground do not go looking for books about the sky. People who have accepted the shell do not seek out words about the breaking through. People who have decided that the thermals are not for them do not spend hours in the company of a voice that is demanding, again and again, that they rise. You found this because something in you already knows. Something in you has always known. The altitude is yours. The storm is fuel. The renewal is available. The vision is possible. The commitment is already in you, waiting for the moment when the fold becomes undeniable. That moment is now. It has always been now. The sky is waiting. Rise. Epilogue. A letter to the eagle you are becoming. 1 year from now, you will look back on this moment. Maybe you will be sitting in a place that is different from where you are sitting now. Maybe the life around you will have changed in ways you cannot fully predict from here. Maybe the vision you carried out of Chapter 4 will be further along than you expected, or it will have evolved into something you did not anticipate when you first allowed yourself to want it. What I know about that future moment, the you that is 1 year ahead, looking back, is that it will be shaped entirely by the decisions you make in the days immediately after this, not the grand gestures, not the dramatic public declarations of transformation, the quiet ones, the ones nobody sees, the ones that happen in the early morning before the house is awake, or in the late evening after the day is done, or in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday when something in you says go and you choose to go, rather than wait for a better time. The eagle does not wait for a better time. The eagle uses this time, this thermal, this wind, this sky as it is today with all its imperfections and unknowns and absence of guarantee. You have everything you need to begin. You have always had everything you need to begin. The beak is ready, the talons are sharp, the feathers are new. All that remains is the fold. Go. End of Develop Eagle Mentality Full Audiobook. Title: Develop Eagle Mentality Full Audiobook. Become unstoppable and soar above all challenges. Screet Statistics. Chapters 14 plus Prologue, Epilogue. Structure. Prologue. Shaft 1. The Mutation. Shaft 2, the Altitude Principle. Shaft 3, the Storm Protocol. Shaft 4, the Vision Architecture. The Secret Chapter. Shaft 5, the Patience of a Predator. Shaft 6, the Territory of the Eagle. Shaft 7, the Weight of the Dead. Shaft 8, the Architecture of Iron. Shaft 9, the Loyalty Code. Shaft 10, the Dark Thermals. Shaft 11, the Silent Hunt. Shaft 12, the Communion of Eagles. Shaft 13, the Kill Shot. Shaft 14, the Ascent Without End. Epilogue. Chapter 2, Expansion. The Cost of the Ground. I want to pause here and spend a moment on something that the altitude principle does not address directly, but must be addressed if we are going to be honest about why most people never develop it. The ground is comfortable. That is not a criticism, it is a description. Comfort is not evil. Comfort is the natural resting state of a system that is not under pressure, and there is nothing inherently wrong with rest. But here is what comfort does to ambition over time. If it is not interrupted, it normalizes. It makes the current state of things feel like the natural state of things. It converts what began as a temporary settling, I will rest here for now while I figure out the next move, into a permanent address. And the longer you live at a given altitude, the more the altitude you used to aspire to begins to feel not like a goal deferred, but like a goal abandoned. Not consciously, You never declared it abandoned, but functionally, it stopped being something you were moving toward and became something you occasionally thought about the way you think about a place you once wanted to visit and probably never will. This is the hidden cost of the ground, not the obvious costs, not the missed opportunities or the unbuilt skills or the unconstructed life. Those are real, but they are visible, at least in retrospect. The hidden cost is subtler and more devastating. The hidden cost is the gradual extinction of the belief that altitude is possible for you. At 22, most people believe they are going somewhere extraordinary. The belief may not be articulated clearly, may not be backed by any specific plan, but it is there, the felt sense of a future self who is larger, more capable, more fully expressed than the current self. The eagles in a person at 22 are still flying. At 42, if the 20 years in between have been spent primarily at ground level, managed, cautious, comfort-optimized years that were often perfectly fine years, years with real joys and real connections, years that were not wasted in any conventional sense, something has often changed in the quality of the belief. It has not necessarily disappeared, but it has shrunk and moved. It used to live in the chest, in the gut, in the immediate felt sense of the future. Now it lives more abstractly, more theoretically. It has become more of a wish than a plan, more of a daydream than a design. That shrinking is not inevitable. It is not the natural consequence of aging or of accumulated life experience. It is the natural consequence of extended residence at ground level in the specific absence of altitude practice. The eagle mentality asks you to interrupt the normalization, to look at the altitude you once believed was possible and ask, is it still possible? Not is it comfortable to pursue, not will the people around me understand it, not is the timing right, but is it possible? Is the capacity for it still there, still buildable, still alive in you? The answer almost always is yes. Diminished, perhaps, requiring more fuel to reignite than it would have required 10 years ago when the fire was still fresh, but alive, and therefore rescuable. Go rescue it. Chapter 5, Expansion, the prey that runs. There is something about the hunt that the patience principle does not cover, and it is the moment when the prey moves. You have been patient, you have circled, you have observed, you have aligned the variables and committed to the trajectory and begun the dive, and then the target changes. It moves. It gets covered by brush. It disappears into a landscape that suddenly looks different from how it looked at altitude. This is not failure. This is hunting. The eagle in mid-dive that loses its target does not complete the dive blindly, hoping the target will be where it was when it last saw it. The eagle adjusts, mid-flight, at speed, with the full commitment of the dive already in progress. It reads the new information and incorporates it without breaking the commitment to make a kill. This is the most sophisticated hunting maneuver in nature, the mid-dive adjustment. In your life, this shows up as the plan that encounters reality. You have developed a vision, reverse-engineered it into present actions, built your commitment, folded your wings, and then reality introduced variables that your planning did not account for. The market shifted, the relationship changed, the resource you were counting on disappeared, the door you were building toward closed. What now? The eagle mentality answer is not to abort, not to return to altitude and start over from scratch, though sometimes that is genuinely the right call. The answer, most often, is the mid-dive adjustment. Keep the commitment to the direction of the hunt, to the fundamental nature of what you are pursuing, while updating the specific targeting to account for what you now see. This requires two things simultaneously that most people find difficult to hold simultaneously: absolute commitment to the goal combined with complete flexibility about the path. Most people are rigid about the path. They fall in love with the specific way they imagined achieving the goal and treat any deviation from it as evidence of failure. The goal shifts, the plan adapts, the commitment remains. That is the mid-dive adjustment. That is the hunt as it actually works. Chapter 8, Expansion, The weight that builds. There is a paradox in the architecture of iron that must be addressed directly. If strength without weight is the goal, if the hollow bone lattice is the ideal, then why does the training required to become strong feel, in the experience of it, like the deliberate accumulation of more weight? Because it is. The training is heavier than what came before it. The skill you are developing is, in the early stages, ungainly, awkward, slow, requiring conscious effort at every step, rather than the fluid unconsciousness of a mastered capability. The relationship you are building is, before it becomes easy and reciprocal, effortful and sometimes uncertain. The habit that will eventually support you is, before it becomes automatic, a deliberate act of will that costs something every time. The weight of development is not the same as the weight of dead things. The dead weight from Chapter 7, the resentment, the identity debt, the other people's opinions, that weight is inert. It does not build anything. It is carried without any return. It is weight for its own sake, the artifact of a past that continues to tax a present it is no longer relevant to. The development weight is different. It is the weight of a bone being stressed, and stressed bone, this is physiological fact, responds to stress by depositing calcium, by becoming denser, by becoming stronger. The bone that is never stressed does not develop the density it is capable of. It remains at the minimum. Stress is the mechanism of structural development. The difficulty of the thing you are currently trying to do is the stress that is building the density you will carry into every future challenge. This is why the eagle mentality does not ask you to make things easier. It asks you to make yourself stronger. There is a profound difference between those two orientations, and everything downstream of how you live depends on which one you have adopted. Make things easier. Reduce the challenge to match the current capability. Comfort maintained. Capability static. Make yourself stronger. Maintain the challenge. Develop the capability to match it. Discomfort necessary. Capability growing. The eagle does not hunt easier prey as it ages. It hunts the same prey with better tools, built by years of hunting. Chapter 11 Expansion. The Witness. The silent hunt has one audience member, you, and here is the most important thing I can tell you about the relationship between your work and the only witness it consistently has. The quality of your private execution is the foundation of your public confidence. This is not about ego, it is not about performance confidence or social confidence or the kind of confidence that other people can see. It is about the specific kind of confidence that lives in the chest of a person who knows exactly how much work they have done, in private, in the hours and years before anyone was watching. The eagle that has made 10,000 dives in its lifetime approaches the 11,000th dive with a quality of certainty that is impossible to manufacture any other way. Not arrogance, certainty, the certainty of the practiced, the certainty of the person who has done the work in private so many times that the work in public is simply the latest iteration of something deeply familiar. That certainty cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be projected without foundation. It can only be earned in the silent hunt, in the hours when nobody is watching, in the work that does not count toward any external metric but that builds, day by day and year by year, the only kind of confidence that holds under pressure. When the moment comes, and the moment always comes, for the person who stays in the hunt, you will reach into the private work and find it there, all of it. Every early morning, every late evening, every day you chose the work over the comfort. Every hour of the silent hunt, it will be there because you put it there, and nothing, not the pressure of the moment, not the size of the audience, not the weight of what is at stake, can take from you what you built in private. Do the private work. Build what only you will ever know you built. Let it hold you when the moment requires holding. Chapter 13 Expansion. After the fold. The dive is not the end of the story. The eagle that folds and commits and makes the strike. There is a moment after impact, after the talons lock, after the prey is taken, that is almost never discussed. a moment of complete stillness. The eagle stands on its kill. It holds, it breathes, it does not immediately begin consuming, does not immediately launch back to altitude, does not immediately begin scanning for the next hunt. It is present with what just happened. That stillness is not rest, it is integration. It is the biological and psychological process of registering that the thing it committed to, the thing it dove toward with everything it had, actually worked. That the commitment was real, that the fold was the right fold, that the altitude and the patience and the vision and the architecture all converged in this moment into the specific tangible reality of the thing achieved. In your life, this integration is called acknowledgement, and it is profoundly undervalued in a culture of relentless forward motion. You fold, you commit, you make the strike, you achieve the thing, the real thing, the one that cost something, the one that required the 5 months on the rock, and the years of the silent hunt, and the patience and the altitude, and then immediately, you are moving to the next thing, the next goal, the next hunt. The integration is skipped entirely. The celebration is brief and guilty and overshadowed by the pressure of whatever comes next. This is a mistake, not because celebrating is indulgent, not because looking backward is wise, but because the integration of real achievement, the genuine, embodied registration that you did the thing you committed to, that the eagle mentality actually works, is what builds the foundation of trust in yourself that the next fold will require. Every successful dive teaches the eagle something about its own capability that no circling from altitude could have taught. Every commitment kept teaches you something about your own reliability that no amount of preparation or intention can provide. Stand on your kill. For a moment, hold what you did. Then return to the sky. Chapter 14, Expansion. The view from here. There is a specific view available from the altitude this book is asking you to reach, and I want to describe it as precisely as I can because I have been in proximity to people who have reached it, and the quality of the view is unlike anything I can describe by analogy. From sufficient altitude, the geography of your life becomes coherent in a way it never is from the ground. The struggles that felt random when you were inside them reveal their patterns. The seasons of drought that you survived by will alone reveal the root systems they forced you to develop. The people who appeared in your life at seemingly arbitrary moments and changed the direction of everything reveal the through line, the theme, the recurring invitation to a specific kind of growth that connected their appearance. You begin to understand from altitude that your life has a shape, not a predetermined shape, not a fate, but a shape that is the result of who you have been, choosing consistently over time in the direction of your truest nature, a shape that could only have come from you. That is, in the deepest sense, your signature. The eagle at maximum altitude can see the whole of its territory at once. Every ridge, every valley, every water source, every area of prey density. The territory that from the ground would take days to walk is, from altitude, a single coherent picture. Your life, from the altitude the eagle mentality builds you toward, becomes a single coherent picture. And when you can see it whole, when the coherence becomes visible, something remarkable happens. You stop being afraid of it, not because it becomes easy, not because the challenges disappear or the storms stop coming. They don't, they will not. But fear, at its root, is the response of a creature that cannot see what is coming, the ground-level creature in the tall grass, reacting to sounds without context, threatened by everything because it cannot see enough to distinguish threat from non-threat. From altitude, you see what is coming, you have time, you have vantage, you have the capacity to respond with choice rather than with panic, and you understand, finally, completely, without reservation, that the altitude was always available to you. You were always capable of this view. You just had to climb to it. You are climbing to it. Keep going. The view from here is worth everything you paid to get here, and everything you will pay to go higher still. Between chapter 6 and 7, the wind you cannot see. There is a type of wind called a microburst that meteorologists spent decades struggling to detect and predict, because it is invisible on conventional radar and appears without warning, and it drops a column of air straight down. Not the horizontal gusts that experience has taught pilots and birds to manage, but a vertical hammer, pushing everything directly toward the ground at speeds that no aircraft is designed to counter by conventional means. Eagles have learned to read microbursts, not because they have instruments, because they have learned to read the behavior of other birds, the sudden scatter of smaller birds at a specific altitude, the way certain insects vanish from the air in a precise pattern that indicates a pressure change above, and because they have learned that certain thermal signatures at certain times of day in certain terrain conditions are precursors to microburst formation. They read what they cannot see by developing an extraordinary sensitivity to what they can see. This is the wind intelligence principle, and it is one of the most transferable things in the entire eagle mentality framework. The invisible forces that will affect your life, the economic shifts, the relationship dynamics that are building beneath the surface of observable behavior, the industry disruptions that are still years from full expression, the health vulnerabilities that have not yet become symptoms. These forces are not, in fact, invisible. They are visible if you have developed the sensitivity to the indicators that precede them. The most sophisticated human thinkers in any domain are not the ones who can respond fastest to what is happening. They are the ones who have developed the sensitivity to read what is coming before it arrives. The investor who reads microclimates of capital behavior. The executive who reads the behavior of talent in the organization before the attrition shows up in numbers. The parent who reads the behavioral changes in a child before the crisis emerges. The artist who reads the cultural shifts before they have been articulated. This sensitivity is not intuition in the mystical sense. It is pattern recognition that has been built through extensive observation, rigorous reflection, and the deliberate practice of asking, every time something visible happens, what invisible process is this the surface of? What invisible processes are showing visible surfaces in your life right now? What are the small birds scattering in your domain? The bridge. What the eagle does not do. There is a section of the eagle mentality that I have been saving because it is the hardest kind of content to receive. It is the content about what the eagle mentality is not, about the specific, common, seductive behaviors that look like altitude but are not altitude, that feel like eagle thinking but are its exact opposite. The first is the performance of difficulty. There is a specific posture, common in achievement-oriented cultures, in entrepreneurial communities, in any space where ambition is celebrated, that treats the visible suffering of effort as a form of currency. The person who is always working the longest hours, always sacrificing, always talking about the weight they are carrying, this person has confused the cost of the hunt with the quality of the hunt. The eagle does not publicize its effort. The eagle hunts. The 6 hours of circling are not announced. The 5 months on the rock are not broadcast. Excellence in private, results in public. If you find yourself performing the difficulty of your journey, if the story of how hard it is has become more central than the actual work, check your altitude. The performance of effort is a ground-level behavior wearing altitude clothing. The second is the accumulation of vision without action. The vision architecture in Chapter 4 is powerful, and like all powerful tools, it can be used in ways that look like progress while producing none. The person who has a magnificent vision, fully detailed, deeply felt, articulated beautifully, who returns to that vision regularly and is moved by it and is inspired by it and uses it as the primary content of their identity, but has not taken a meaningful action toward it in 6 months, is not living the eagle mentality. They are living in the vision as a substitute for the work of realizing the vision. The vision is a map. Maps have no value to people who are not moving. The vision becomes real only in its conversion into action, specific, dated, committed, accountable action. And if the conversion is not happening, the vision, however beautiful, is serving primarily as a comfort rather than a compass. The third is the use of altitude as distance. There are people who climb because they genuinely need to see farther, need to operate from a larger perspective, need the space and quiet of altitude to do the thinking their work requires. And then there are people who climb because the altitude makes them unreachable, because from sufficient height, the specific, messy, demanding details of human relationship, the commitment to show up, the willingness to be affected, the vulnerability of genuine connection, are reduced to something manageable, distant, controllable. This is not the eagle mentality. The eagle has a nest. The eagle has a mate. The eagle has eaglets it will push off a cliff face when the time comes because it loves them enough to insist on their flight. Altitude in service of connection and effectiveness is the eagle mentality. Altitude as a substitute for connection, as armor, as avoidance, as the permanent excuse of being too high and too busy to be fully present in the lives of people who need you. That is not altitude. That is running. The eagle mentality does not run. It rises and it returns. Final meditation. The 60 million year inheritance. Eagles have existed for 60 million years, before humans had language, before we had fire, before we had the tool use that we claim distinguishes us from every other animal on the planet. Before any of the things we define ourselves by were even potential, the eagle was already here, already perfected, already the embodied expression of every principle in this book, flying over a world that had not yet imagined us. For 60 million years, through 5 mass extinction events, through climate shifts that remade every ecosystem on Earth, through the emergence and disappearance of thousands of species that were larger and stronger and seemingly more dominant, the eagle has survived. Not by being the most powerful creature on the ground, by mastering the sky, by choosing altitude when everything else chose safety, by using storms when everything else sought shelter, by seeing farther than anything else could see, by committing to the fold with a precision that has not changed in 60 million years because it was right the first time and has never needed to change. There is something in you that is much older than your fears, something that was built before the culture that taught you to stay small, before the relationships that taught you to be careful, before the failures that taught you that ambition is dangerous and visibility is vulnerability, something that has been waiting, with the patience of geological time, for you to stop managing your smallness and start inhabiting your size. The eagle in you is 60 million years old. It is not going anywhere. It will wait as long as necessary, but every day it waits is a day you are not flying, and you were built for the sky. Go find it. Go live in it. Go become, in the single lifetime you have been given, the most complete and magnificent expression of what you were always capable of being. The sky is not a reward for becoming the eagle. The sky is where you find out that you always were one. Rise